Well, I'm going to start again, as I usually do, at the beginning of each of these roundtable discussions. And I welcome you all. And Tony Gaffney, the CEO of the Vector Institute, is our guest today. In terms of positioning this, I want to go back to what we were doing before, and that's always to remember where we're coming from. We spent several million years as hunter-gatherers. Then we spent several 100,000 years as agricultural settlers. And then we've spent a couple of centuries in the industrial age and a couple of decades in the information age. And we've now just emerging into the cognitive augmentation age. This is the age where tools, which used to be passive, i.e., a stone chipper used to take the skin off of an ancient mammal, was used by a human being, to generative tools that are now coming out of the programming themselves. This has never happened before, and it's an amazing, amazing event in human history. It has an exponentiating improvement. That is, things are improving faster and faster and faster. And one of the things that always captures me about Nick, who I'll introduce in a second, is that he's in the middle of this. And Nick himself says, I can never believe the pace of change that's going on inside. He's not an observer. He's not a commentator. He's not a journalist. He's in the middle of it. And he can't believe the pace of improvement. So it's never happened before in human history to have an exponential improvement. And Nick thinks of these as three kinds of AI: computational, where the superhuman math almost always overwhelms human capabilities, and generative AI, generating new ideas and increasing productivity by 50%, and sensory AI. To me, it's simple for business. It's an extinction event. And if you don't get started on this journey now, there's only one question left to ask, and that is, where do you want to be buried? So with that, Nick, I'll pass it over to you. Where do you want to be buried?
I'm not thinking about this quite yet, but some companies, unfortunately, will have to start thinking about that soon. So thanks for that introduction, David. Always provocative, and I think it is important to be provocative for this important topic. Yes, I'm in the middle of this in Silicon Valley, but I'm going to introduce somebody who arguably is even more in the middle of this. This is Tony Gaffney, who's CEO of the Vector Institute, which, in my view, is one of the most important players in AI in Canada. He helped to develop responsible AI and help encourage governments as well as industry to adopt AI in a responsible manner. Before joining the Vector Institute, Tony has got an extraordinary career as a senior executive. He was the CEO of Bell Nexia. He was CEO of BCE Emergis. He was a managing partner at Accenture. He worked at MCI, Anderson Consulting, and so on and so forth. He was on the board of Loblaws. I have a number of different nonprofits as well, including the United Way. And he is a prize advisor to the government. He's on the Government of Canada Advisory Council on AI and a member of the OECD AI network. So Tony is right smack in the middle of all of these complex issues. He's trying to encourage industries to move forward with AI, but at the same time, do it in a way that's really, really responsible. So, Tony, we're super psyched to have you, and the floor is yours.
Nick, thank you very much. And David, I have not booked any burial plots personally and not intending to in the near term, but appreciate the clear message that the biggest risk is missing the opportunity with AI. So what I'd like to do is just take you for a few moments back to a point in time in the chapter that David described we're now in. Here in Toronto, this group are often referred to as the godfathers of AI. Geoff Hinton and Joshua and Bengio here in Canada were awarded the Turing Award for their advancement of AI in terms of its power and intelligence. And out of that work, Vector was born. And I'll take a moment to describe to you what we are today. But amongst the people sitting in this photograph, the majority of them have gone out into the world and are playing key roles. Whether Geoff Hinton, who remains our scientific advisor, worked for many years with Google Brain, and others in that picture would include Raquel, who founded Wabi, which is an autonomous truck company here in Canada, Brendan Frey, who founded Deep Genomics, which explores treatment pathways for rare genetic disorders, I can see Roger Gross, David Duveneau, they're working with Anthropic, focused on AI safety and particularly looking ahead at existential risk. Sanya is AI research leader at NVIDIA. I can go on and on, but you got the message. All continue to be directly engaged as faculty with us here at Vector. And just to give you a sense on what we've become from that early founding at Vector, for those of you who are less familiar with us, we're a research institute shaping the global agenda in AI futures, research, commercialization, safety, environment, society, and governance. And our community, all working together, comprises 700 researchers, 1,400 students. We've got multiple academic partners, 30 large corporations, 50 health institutions, and close to 400 AI startups and scale-ups involved with our community, all collaborating to drive discovery, economic growth, and societal benefit, essentially shaping the future of AI. And I have to say, we're funded by, and we couldn't do anything of what we're doing if it wasn't for the generous and ongoing support of the federal government and provincial government and corporate sponsors. This gives a little further detail on some of the makeup. But what I would like to call out is just simply Brookings' statement early on in the establishment of Vector. And it commented that we represented one of the most ambitious efforts in North America to upgrade a strong ecosystem into a world-class position. And we had Jensen, CEO of NVIDIA, here recently, and he criticized us as Canadians for being too humble and reminded us that Canada is, in fact, the epicenter in terms of the development of modern AI, and we should recognize that and build on it. And you can see from this slide the impact that the ecosystem is actually having. So we're ranked first in the 5-year average year-over-year growth rate in AI talent. We produce more AI publications per capita in 2022 than any other G7 nation. That's a key indicator of advanced research. And from a VC investment, we're ranked third amongst G7 countries on a per capita basis. And from a patent perspective, patents filed nationally, we rose by 50% plus in 22 and 23. However, on the ranking in terms of adoption, we're quite low relative to many other countries, and that's a topic that we should explore while we're talking to. And I'm just going to give you a little more of a lens when it comes to adoption of talent itself. In terms of as a talent hub, we are the fastest growing in North America, have been over the past 5 years, and we're one of the few talent hubs in the world with the net income of talent. And as a result, it's been of enormous benefit to the country, not just in terms of driving our own AI agenda, but in attracting foreign investment into the country, and where they view our AI talent as a key draw to invest in Canada. Now, let me go back to the adoption journey. And hopefully in this discussion, we'll have a chance to talk about the steps that companies are beginning to realize they need to go through in order to begin to adopt AI broadly. And certainly over time, the established AI that has emerged and is quite predictive, it's been used a lot by companies and has become very much a matter of course for many. But when it comes to the more advanced AI that we're now talking to, that became so well understood last year and is very much a focus in terms of the opportunity to create value and improve performance, advance organizations in so many ways, we're seen as emerging practice is companies saying, where do I start and how do I move forward? The first step is certainly to continue experimenting and deploying the AI that's been around for quite some time. And with generative AI, to realize that it's actually probably being used extensively within your organization by individual employees, many of your executives, and often a good number of your board members. And the challenge there is to understand what you're using, how set some guardrails and policies even in terms of how to use it, and to encourage that level of innovation within the company in a safe way. in terms of the journey to more fully take advantage of modern AI as it's become, it is important to start thinking about how you access the research that's underway to fuel your own innovation and start building your own talent. There are key elements to start out with in terms of building the talent and the capacity, and that includes, broadly making sure that your employees are aware and understand, and that you build the various specialty talent that's required. AI is only as good as its data. So making sure that your data strategy is in place, you've got the right stewards and policies and governance around that. And then something organizations often don't give a lot of thought to beyond the importance of data is that AI, particularly generative AI, requires, certainly in its early development, if you're an organization who's involved in that, some of the large organizations are, it can require compute levels above what you've ever used, and certainly often would not even be able to imagine. But the demand from a compute perspective is very, very high, depending on how you're using the AI. And then beyond using, on a use case basis, there is quite an acknowledgement that the enterprise, even the business model, needs to adopt to the use of AI to facilitate the value that it can create. And in some companies, they're rethinking the actual business model itself. And in fact, to look a bit more like a tech company, because the tech companies have been on a path essentially preparing for this level of more powerful technology and how to adopt it. Their philosophy, if you think of Amazon, for example, is that customer interaction shouldn't occur other than on an exception basis in order to deliver an outstanding experience to customers. The other thing I'd call out, and I'm sure if I put the vote around the table, a lot would put up their hands, is what about the risks of AI? And this is a really important topic for organizations to get their mind around. A lot of call out last year on the existential risks associated with AI. And as practice emerges, most organizations are getting their mind around that, yes, there is existential risk, but there are many risks that as AI becomes more powerful that we deal with today, but get amplified by AI. So cybersecurity, misinformation, it would all be, examples of that. Gen AI, as it's deployed, has the potential for massive workforce disruption. Privacy and security, also amplified. Bias and fairness, also amplified with AI. So what we're seeing is a more balanced view. I think, enterprise risk management is wonderful in that it looks at things like market risk, which is what David was calling out. There's a huge opportunity here, and companies who don't embrace that opportunity are at risk of their own sustainability, without a doubt. There is longer-term existential risk that's been called out, but there's an awful lot that can be done before we have to face that head on. In fact, the researchers who called it out would say that their expectation was that we would land on that level of intelligence in maybe 50 plus years. And their point is that is going to happen a lot sooner, maybe in the next, later in this decade or next decade, and hence why they're calling out the alarm. But looking at it from a risk management perspective, recognizing missing the opportunity is the first risk. Taking a traditional risk overview lens onto AI is really important, because then you can use your established guardrails and risk expertise and begin to think through the various segments of risk you look at and consider from an AI perspective, how does that become amplified in that risk area, and get your mind around in your organization as to how it could enhance that risk. And then from a mitigation perspective, to explore, as you build the capabilities, how AI itself can be used as a tool to mitigate risk. But a very important way to think about it when it comes to deploying use cases, many of our mature organizations, our larger leading organizations on AI adoption, are actually forming committees, not just from a tech perspective, but from an ethic, risk, and employee interest perspective, putting those lenses on to determine with their pipeline of use cases as to, from an opportunity and risk perspective, which they should proceed with, that are within their risk appetite. And we're seeing the pipelines of use cases now starting to flow to drive adoption, where companies have deployed that rigor and discipline to make sure that it's used safely. I'm going to call out just, to give examples. It's one thing to talk about AI, but adoption, I think, is really important, and here in Canada for us to accelerate. But we have models in terms of companies who are doing this very well. And good examples would be RBC, TD, and BMO, who have just been ranked in the Evident Insights report, recently published, as 3 of the top 10 banks in the world for AI adoption, and examples of how they're using it. We worked to support CIBC as they worked through and beyond the pandemic to really understand the data shift that had occurred, the shift in their data that they depend upon due to the COVID period and going out and beyond it. So we actually supported them using AI to address that as an issue. Other organizations, examples of what they're doing, TELUS is another good example. They looked at energy usage in their data centers and were able to, using AI, actually reduce that by over 10%. And as you know, that's a major impact and benefit. They're now working to actually open source that so that others can take advantage of it to advance their own efforts in terms of addressing climate change and our efforts to get to net zero. TELUS is another good example, and they've used that extensively in their own business as well. They're very focused on autonomous vehicles, including trains. So they're actually heavily drawing on our research work in computer vision, which, as you can imagine, is critically important to train the models that drive autonomous vehicles. And this is another framework I want to share with you that can be helpful in reflecting as to where you are at on the journey to adopt AI. And level 1 is really just reflecting on how aware are you, and within levels of your organization, and making sure that you're going through the cycle of making sure that your employees are aware in the right way, understand AI to the point that their anxieties are not presenting inertia to your plans to adopt AI as well. And that whole workforce disruption consideration needs to be part of that, to support your employees in understanding AI and begin to embrace as to where it can augment them, benefit them in so many ways, and enable them to see themselves in your own transformation plan to take advantage of it. And then working up from that to the various levels up to where you ought to aspire to be as you evolve and mature in your understanding and deployment of AI. And we'll leave this with you as a reference framework. What we certainly find is that each organization is at a different place in terms of adoption and its journey to take advantage of this opportunity. And what is most important that we would recommend is, if you haven't started, get started, because the risks of not getting on with it are very, very high. I will give you, just a reference point. Our startups, who are, I would call them AI first, their whole business is enabled by AI, are finding very quickly that they can actually establish and launch their companies far faster than they would have ever imagined, with less capital and fewer people. And examples of those within our own ecosystem would be Cohere, now in a position to go public globally and to take on OpenAI, Canadian company that just a few years ago was very much a startup. Waabi is on its path and highly respected in autonomous truck development. And I could list others, but they were very short periods of time from when they started up to when they're actually on the world's stage, being acknowledged as leaders in their particular areas. So Nick and David, I was going to keep my presentation brief and to what I just covered, because I know a huge part of the value is not me talking, but us getting into a dialogue and engaging all those in attendance from a Q&A perspective as well.
Yeah, Nick, can I jump in? Because Nick, you had an example. I was thinking of TELUS and its energy use. Google is one of the largest electricity consumers in the world and has made massive savings, has it not, by using generative AI in control of its cloud computing organizations?
It did. Like Tony, I was glad to see that use case. That use case should be, imagine the energy we could save around the world if every company was using AI and its use of energy. So that was a fantastic use case. I would encourage people to ask questions in the chat, but in the meantime, as the questions come in, David and I will, I've gotten so many questions based on your great presentation, Tony.
So something I'll say about Canada from a compute perspective, AI compute is a major consideration in terms of impact on the environment because of the compute that it requires. And our availability and resource of green power gives us great advantage as a country. I know there are many countries recommended on this are participating in the call. So come here at some point soon. Hopefully we'll have the compute to support you.
Exactly. Plus, if you build a data center where it's cold, it's cheaper because you've got. Well, Tony, you started the conversation with a great dichotomy, which is that Canada is in many ways, one of the world's leaders in kind of creating these AI technologies, but at the same time, kind of lagging behind in
Mhm.
terms of adopting these technologies from an industry perspective, except, maybe in banking where we are, doing well. Why do you think that is? Why can we have all this amazing research and these amazing scientists, yet kind of the average business person in Canada is not deploying these tools?
Well, I'd start with a little history. Canada has an outstanding track record of being the epicenter of the research and development of several things and followed a pattern where the rest of the world adopted it at speed and created enormous value outside of the country. So it's my call out is we can't let that happen with AI in Canada. Getting to the question of why the low level of adoption. And by the way, recent figures indicate that we are definitely picking it up. But as we look at the reasons for it, for whatever reason, we are one of the most anxious countries in the world when it comes to AI risk. And that is a hurdle right there. I think that for people who are employed, whether it's in organizations or with government or just as a nation, it's really important that we all put the effort in to increase awareness, provide the educational support, and have people understand that what the risks actually are and how they're being addressed, whether it's research or actual policy, legislation, regulation that's in place. So a lot's been done to address the risk and support them in understanding that AI can augment everyone and help them get away from doing mundane work as the Industrial Revolution did that. Here's another opportunity for us to take advantage of AI. And we're on a path in terms of guardrails to ensure that humans control machines. Simple as that. And beyond AI, there'll be other aspects like quantum computers when they come in to even accelerate the intelligence of machines and capabilities of machines. We're just going to have to keep to that principle that we're going to be the ones to control the machines.
Oh, that's a good
I
point.
would say, Nick, there is a consideration as well. I think the startup community have great opportunity to adopt fast. Large organizations are certainly moving in that regard. The crux in Canada, from a productivity and economic performance, has always been the makeup of our economy. And so much of the capability of AI is now being made available. If you're on a Microsoft platform, you've got generative AI in there, and you can switch it on if you do it smartly, which is going to help companies that are in the small to medium sized small business and small to medium business more broadly. Presents a new opportunity actually to drive adoption as well.
No, that's right. Well, David and I have been kind of touring Canada together and going to board meetings to raise awareness, to your point.
Yeah.
And I've kind of been keeping track. So I've done about 39 board meetings in the last few months. And I'd say that, the awareness is relatively low, but quickly raises when, you put like somebody like David Beatty or yourself in front of a board, right? I think people really pay attention. But then what we hear often is, well, look, I get it. I need to move, but the risks are significant, at least in my view. So I'm going to adopt a fast follower strategy. I'm going to wait, 2 or 3 years to see what the US and the UK and China do,
Mhm.
and then kind of follow on with that. Do you think that's a viable strategy with AI?
So I think, like all technologies, you do have to decide if you're going to be on the bleeding edge or not. And with any technology, and doing so, it carries risks associated with it. On the flip side, I would say it's really important to understand the pace at which AI is accelerating. And if people talk about the curve, right, that got us to where we are, what you can't forget about is the curve continues. So the race from a competition amongst companies in different industries or even governments, right? The pace of the race has changed. So if you don't get into the race, you're going to find yourself increasingly behind the pack. So I think my recommendation to organizations is to get on top of this right away really understand how it's been used within the company, make sure that they're addressing the employee awareness perspective, putting guardrails around what they have. They'll be surprised at how much AI is being used within their organizations already, and then really get on that maturing curve that I indicated earlier. So I think it's a dangerous way of thinking to be, in the follower pack. Definitely be a fast follower of the globally.
No, I would agree with you. A couple of points I would like to make, which is when technology is doubling in power every 3, 4 months, which we've never seen before, and that's a 30,000x improvement in 5 years. I know we can debate whether that's going to continue or not, but to your point, we've never seen anything move at this pace. So if you don't start building the muscles now, it's going to be really hard to keep up with folks who have. And then there's a McKinsey study that came out not too long ago that showed that when there's a large innovation in an industry, if you're not in the top 20% of fast followers, you really get left behind. So yes, fast follower may be a strategy, but you got to be in the top quintile or else you'll be in trouble.
And Nick, talking of rankings, Canada is ranked for all the reasons that I mentioned earlier, was fourth out of 50 countries, slipped to fifth because we dropped about 10 points on compute infrastructure. We just addressed that as a country with the investments announced about 2 weeks ago. Data is another component we need to address from a sovereign perspective. But we're fourth, we slipped from fourth to fifth. So we're still in that upper group. And the elements need to be in place, but we've got to get on with adoption to stay there.
We've got a question from the audience, from Monica. Hi, Monica. It's good to see you. We haven't talked in a while. I hope you're doing well. Monica's on a number of boards, and she's asking, I think, a really important question, which is that when the board is pushing management to get started on this, often what we hear back is, hey, look, yes, we want to do AI, but we have to put in place the building blocks of clean data, compute. We have infrastructure to build before we can do this, but that takes time. So, is there a way to, while building the infrastructure, to also start experimenting with things that can be more immediate? How do you think about kind of the short term and the longer term?
I think in the immediate term, the pushback is correct that you need the data, you need the talent, you need the compute. But if you're just using models, you don't need the supercompute, because the supercompute is consumed in the early development and training of the models. So I wouldn't overstate the compute, and cloud services are definitely available in relation to that. So talent, compute, start with what you have. Small models can be run on phones now, if you look at some of the recent announcements, and we're certainly seeing that on the research side. And getting going on data is really important. But I think all of that has to be taken into consideration. I think from a cultural perspective, giving people permission, like to experiment in specific areas and to set up the right guardrails, but you want to encourage that experimentation. And what you have in most companies right now is a lot of people already have ChatGPT, are playing around with generative AI on their computer that's been provided by the company. So rather than reacting by trying to protect the organization from all that activity and shut it down, actually make sure it's set up for safe use, and then really encourage it and put in place a culture of innovation. We're seeing, in our own marketing team, for instance, we've done exactly that, and the team are thrilled, right? They're able to really get onto the creative stuff and use generative AI to generate the presentations, all that type of thing. So
no, that's great, Tony. And one of the pieces of advice that David and I give to boards is to inventory the existing use cases in your industry that have been publicized. Right? If a company is talking about an AI use case, presumably it's gone well. Presumably it hasn't broken anything yet, right? So just kind of this inventory what's already happened in the industry and pick one use case that has some impact, positive impact, but very, very low risk, and start with that.
And actually, you can just ask ChatGPT, formulate the question effectively, and it will give you exactly what you just suggested that companies should
Yeah,
Before we have a board meeting, David and
yeah,
I go to ChatGPT, like tell me the top 20 use cases in rail transportation, for example.
yeah.
And
There you
it
go.
just comes out, right? So it's not hard. And for me, I'm on four boards as well. Like as a board member, I think one of the biggest, value adds that I can add is just continuously bringing up use cases in the industry, right?
Yeah.
Positivity, like, hey, look, this is how we delight customers with this. This is how we can change, and so on and so forth. You mentioned as well, though, that there are real risks in the short term, and we do want to experiment. But kind of taking your example of employees using ChatGPT, right?
Mhm.
Most senior executives don't know that whatever is put into ChatGPT actually stays there and can then be found by other folks. And 11% of what's put inside ChatGPT is confidential information from
Mhm.
so employees don't fully understand this yet. So how does one encourage innovation, to your point, which I think is critical, while also having good governance and making sure that some of these risks are well contained?
Yeah, I would say one is to stop thinking about AI as its own thing, something different, and think of it as it brings intelligence to digital. And a lot of the concerns as digital evolved are still are applicable to AI, right? If you think about it, privacy of data to the company and so on. So start with the guardrails you already have and the policies you already have in terms of use of the platform of the organization, and then start to upgrade those to accommodate AI, because many of the risks are the same with digital, only AI exponentially increases that. And then the other area that is really, really important is that depending on your policies and even how you've set up your enterprise platform, as Gen AI is released within these products, whether it's Google or Microsoft, it needs to be configured correctly so that the automatic, so what you put in doesn't necessarily get onto the cloud and be available commercially and publicly for others to leverage. And you really have to, it's down to locking down your standard configuration in a way that includes AI. And then you're setting up almost a sandbox with the right leadership oversight on the innovation that is taking place to set your employees up and departments and areas of the company in the way that they can experiment within a virtual sandbox, but do it safely. And the other element with it is just fail fast, right? What we saw early on was a pursuit of use cases, and really you're better off pursuing where there's opportunity to create value by either being able to predict something better, or where a key decision needs to be made that Gen AI could support.
No, that's
But
right, Tony.
chase the value opportunity, not
Right.
just the use case.
We've got a question from Nicole. Nicole's asking, look, if you're thinking about rolling out AI inside a company, there's at least three different ways. One is you work with third-party software that already has AI built in. Your Microsoft example is a really good one. You partner with the Vector Institute or other partners like that to co-develop things, uh, and or you build your own kind of custom AI internally. How do you think about these three different approaches, and when is the right time to use them?
So I would say think of the business transformation, the technology-enabled business transformation approaches and learnings that we've all had through all of the waves of technology that has occurred. That all applies to AI. So as you develop a strategy and approach, the pace of acceleration of products that are enabled by AI is increasing at the same pace of advancement of AI itself. So I would be very, open to selecting, being aware of what products are there to get the job done that you're trying to get done and take advantage of them. But you need to be selective to ensure that they're products you can trust. Right. So unpack it, make sure that it's named brand, what have you, or one you can trust, and you need to do your diligence on it. I think all of the support resources that are there, all the major consulting firms, as you would have noticed, are actually Vector sponsors, and they're advancing from digital transformation to leveraging AI as a next chapter in digital transformation. So they're building their capabilities fast, and there are startup companies a good number in our own community who are focused on supporting AI transformation as well, not just from an application perspective, but right through to ethics, legal considerations, governance, focus, and so on. So be aware there's a growing product and consulting and services industry building up to support organizations. We're on the, our research is leading. So we provide an opportunity within our community for members of the community through our applied engineering capability. And we've got an innovation platform that all of our community participate on to harvest the latest in AI that's available. For example, we were supporting companies and looking at AI risk 2-3 years ago. We were working on the various elements that make up ChatGPT for the past 3, 4, 5 years. NLP, which is how you interact. And we've been running joint workshops with our partners on that for the last 1 to 2 years. RAG, as you put in your own input, multimedia, video, all that sort of stuff. We're very advanced on from a research and adoption perspective. So we're an option as well for companies to tap into that. And the maturity curve on that slide I showed you is some companies have no expertise but want to build an AI center of excellence or capability themselves, and we're helping them go from zero to building, working their way through it. And others like, say, RBC, who've got over 1,000 people in AI, are working with us very closely to take advantage of our most advanced research and collaborating on that as well. If you play it back 6 months ago, your options were few. If you play it forward 6 to 12, 18 months, the market is going to fill in the way that you traditionally would have drawn support. And we think we bring a unique capability from Vector in that.
Just to make sure I hear you correctly, I kind of combining two of your answers. What I'm hearing you say is start with the business benefit first, not the use case.
Yeah.
And once you have that, scour the world for the right partners, and then experiment, try to do something quickly, right? And then once you've got some proof that this is working, then maybe you can invest to build your own, AI. But we're going to always starting with the business transformation use case and the business benefit. And then in one of your slides, you had something really, really interesting, which is really near and dear to my heart, which is the experimentation process. I'm a big believer that companies who test more are very hard to catch. Right? I was, once I was talking to the CEO of a large car company, and they said to me that they were going to catch Tesla and electric cars within the next, 2 years. And me being the difficult person I can be sometimes, I said, well, okay, so you're in the Olympics, you're running the 100-meter dash against Tesla. Where's Tesla today? I don't know, well, 40-meter mark. And then, my next question was, who runs faster? So you can see that this person's jaw kind of dropped, and they're like, you jerk, why did you ask me this question? But that's my being Canadian, but having lived in the US for the last 20 years, my observation of what's happening in Canada is a little bit of timidity to get things started, but also not running as fast as some other places in the world where experimentation is de rigueur and happens really quickly. So if you're advising a company to build an experimentation process, and especially around AI, which has more risk than other experimentation strategies. In one of your slides, you had we helped somebody de-risk the experimentation process. Like, what does that mean, and how can a company do that?
I think there's a lot of corporate directors on this call, and I'll answer it from that down in the organization next. So I think within the boardroom, key questions that the board should be asking and having answers to quickly is, to what degree is AI being used within the organization today, and having that baseline understanding. Then there's an awareness kind of education across the board, and management can play a big role in this, is talking about making sure there's a good broad understanding of the risks associated with AI. So even starting with the framework that I had earlier in the deck, and to make sure there's that level of awareness. Then there should be an urgent effort put in to upgrading the enterprise risk register that the board uses today to update it for AI, both in terms of risk identification and over time how AI can help mitigate that. We're working with the banks healthcare and AI VC community to develop exactly that from a lot of workshops we've been running over the last few years, which included collaborating with the banks and OSFI, for example. So we're very, very close. In the next few months, we'll have a reference risk register that can be used by boards, and then to explore, to look outside of the organization and really, lift their head up and learn as to, in their particular industries, what risks need to be considered, because AI is going to be used everywhere. It's going to be used in every industry. And a good reference point is most industries have rules and regulations and practices and risk oversight approaches for any high impact products and services. So drug industry, food industry, airline industry, and start, again, not looking at AI as something separate, but put it in that category within your industry and understand the risk. And then look into your own organization and say, with that view, what are the risks that we face right now? And then work, obviously, with that framework, you then, along with the leadership team, need to activate, depending on your sophistication from a risk management perspective. And banking, it has to go right into the risk department and cascade down through all of their models. And in other sectors, it's a lighter touch, but with the same intent. But I would say that's a very, very basic step one. And if you don't do it quickly, you're absolutely exposed from a brand and reputational perspective. Just that the left-hand side of that risk register that I highlighted earlier, any one of those can take your brand reputation and trust away.
Right. Question from the audience. Obviously, the Vector Institute and you personally have been advising governments, including the government of Canada. And there's a recent announcement of a large investment from the government of Canada in AI, as well as a bill making its way, in the House of Commons around AI. Like anything that you can share about, how the government of Canada is thinking about AI and any kind of, your point of view on how the government can help Canada, increase its competitiveness, in terms of the AI strategy.
So I would say, again, I'm going to put it back to the government's role in any new technology, and this is certainly another big new wave, is to, number one, protect people. So it's doing that and was one of the first countries in the world. Actually, we were the first to put a national AI strategy on the table globally, and we were the first to put a regulatory approach on the table globally as well. So the ADA Bill C-27 is where a lot of that effort is concentrated. So the government's role is to protect people. It's doing that. But your question was more broad, Nick. And the other aspect is that it needs to encourage innovation and adoption of those new technologies more broadly. It is getting very focused on how to get our nation more aware, less anxious, and comfortable with AI. Because for the government itself, AI presents a huge opportunity, and they need confidence of people in Canada to advance that. The other element that government has done over time, often very well, is to be a role model in the adoption of technology. And AI, it presents a huge opportunity to them in terms of efficiency and improving public services, and I would include health in that. And all of that is central to their own priority, which is to improve productivity in the country, where we're really slipping, and AI presents great opportunity to it, and helping to reverse that for economic benefit, which enables societal benefit as well. And then looking in the mirror, they're the largest organizations in the country, so they can have a huge impact on that. So they are very seriously beginning to look at how they themselves, public sector AI, can role model that throughout government, which is a huge task. But that's absolutely up on their agenda, and we're particularly excited about that in public sector AI generally, because a lot of the focus on the development and use of AI is by nature with industry very near to medium term kind of value creation focused, and yet there are functions like valuation of these models or validation of these models, registration of these models, as examples that don't fit into industry. There's a compliance effort they'll go through, but where can the leadership come from in some of those areas. And what we're seeing around the world is governments are stepping up to fill in there. And the Canadian government, certainly in terms of intentions, is, I know from conversations, very open to exploring what they can do to cover those, let's call it white space around AI. So I hope that touches on the different perspectives.
No, it does. Thank you. Got I'm going to join kind of two questions here, one from Colleen and one from Nicole. And they're suggesting, I think correctly, that the future is going to be a patchwork of working with different suppliers and different partners. If you get a complex organization, you're going to have tens and tens of different AI models, and one in HR, one in legal, one in operations. Like, how does one think about the governance of the AI inside of suppliers strategy, right? How do you make sure that you don't introduce something bad by partnering with somebody that has a model that is breaking a rule that they should not be breaking?
So I think there's a number of things that, first of all, everybody needs to absolutely have their, be totally alert the risk associated with the proliferation of options that you might have right now. But there are a couple of trends that I think are going to help alleviate that. The number of models is beginning to reduce. So if you talk to some of, I talk often to our founders and faculty who are in industry, and they're saying, they started out working with 15 models, now they're down to one. We're going to see a proliferation of industry-specific models. So you're going to see a reduction in the number of options. I think it's probably going to increase in the immediate term, but definitely the trend is going to become simpler. In the medium term, I think be really alert and do your diligence as best you can. The other trend is there will be in fact, there is already, and we're actually doing some of this ourselves, is evaluating models to make sure that from a risk perspective, they can be trusted and will not do any harm. And you're going to see the capacity and options and having new models validated and, in essence, certified become more common and available to companies. And it might be that when you pick up a drug, it's safe. Largely, that you can trust it.
Largely.
Same with food. It's going to be the same with products and models that come about. And the only caution with generative AI, and David called this out at the beginning, is that you get what you purchase or pay for, but then it keeps evolving and your own use of it because it keeps learning. So this validation, certification, instant management is going to become just like other high impact products and services for things that are enabled by AI. It's not, your car is going to have to be certified in that way. Your drugs that were produced, your food that was produced by AI enabled capabilities, it's going to fit in with what we're used to, but the ecosystem has to upgrade from a validation, certification, monitoring perspective.
Okay, there's a good example. I got the Tesla in California is giving out people for a month free the full self-driving. So I've got it for free right now as a test. And I just 2 days ago I went from point A to point B, and it was just magical. And then yesterday I did the exact same route, and it missed my exit. So I was like,
oh, that's wild. Well, if I own autonomous vehicles, I rode a Waymo in San Francisco, which they've got 200 Waymos going around, and that was originally a Google initiative, and it's still part of them. And the experience, I felt safer than any Uber driver I've ever traveled in, and certainly the ride to the airport in Toronto, it was way safer. And then the following Friday, I was with David Fleet, whose focus is on that. And he actually stepped in behind Jeff at Google Brain. And he was running a lecture on where they're at from a research perspective on computer vision, which enables all of this. And I asked him the basic question. So how does what I experienced last weekend in San Francisco, which was on St. Patrick's Day and at nighttime when the party was full on, how does the computer vision that enabled that compared to what you as researchers are talking about now? And he just said, we're light years ahead. So, and they just cut a deal to get access to all of Waymo's data for our researchers to leverage in our research work. So whatever, shortfalls exist with autonomous vehicles today, certainly there's opportunity to significantly advance it sooner than I think we would all expect.
No, I agree. I used to work at Google, as you know, for a number of years and took a lot of rides in these cars, and the cars never had an accident. No, it's been rear-ended by other cars, but it's never
Yeah.
hit anything. So I think we're getting close there. Couple of questions about specific industries.
Yep.
One from Chantal, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Can you talk about AI in nonprofits? And then one from Atul, and can you talk about AI in terms of the energy industry, and is Canada behind or ahead in that particular industry? So nonprofits as well as energy.
Okay. So on the nonprofit side, huge opportunity. I'll give you an example, Kids Help phone line. In fact, we're having a celebration with their board this evening, and particularly around this particular project. But they, if you can picture it, particularly through COVID, particularly post-COVID, the number of youth who are reaching into the Kids Help phone line for support. And the biggest and the most tense moment, or one of the most stressful moments for those accepting the call, are those few seconds of triage to determine, is this a genuine call? Where on the risk level does it sit? Is it somebody who might be about suicidal in the moment? And we've deployed an AI enabled triage capability that has dramatically improved the accuracy of the triage and the pressure, the individual agent. And you can imagine we've deployed AI capabilities in health as well.
Does it look at does it analyze the tone of voice and the words a person is
Yes,
speaking?
it does.
Yeah. Okay.
In fact, I'll make a point on this. I was very curious on that particular project as to how diverse the thinkers were around it. And we had multiple disciplines engaged in the research and development of that capability. And one of the lead individuals, I couldn't figure out the voice question. I was chatting with him for a few minutes, and then I said, "What are you personally most passionate about?" He said, "Music," and had spent his life, with music as a passion. And he had that was a huge asset to him on the voice interpretation strategies that they chose. But the safety, the guardrails we have to go through, and use cases in health are very, very similar to this, are no different to a new clinician process or a new procedure that's introduced in a patient care environment. So again, an example of where there are guardrails already there that you need to take advantage of them, upgrade them, and use them for AI.
And in terms of the energy industry, we also have Tanya wants to know about the CPG industry. So, what are the kind of key uses of AI in energy and CPG as well?
Well, in energy, and how broadly do you look at the energy industry? In terms of hydro, for example, or new forms like renewable energies. A good example would be, people don't think about it all that much, is first of all, you've got to get to baseload, and that AI can help in many ways there. But I'll give you a more unusual example. People don't talk a whole lot about distribution. That's a huge issue with renewables, and power always has been with power generally. So AI can be powerful from a prediction perspective and generation perspective as to the best distribution strategies at any moment in time, and predicting, over 12, 20, whatever cycle. So certainly very, very relevant there. The other is the extraction aspects of energy and resources, if you get more broadly into that. And a great example would be, and I'll make it very relevant, the investments being made in EV manufacturing, the critical minerals that are required there and materials that are required. And AI can hugely impact the identification, make it more efficient in terms of extraction. And also the Accelerations Consortium, two of our faculty founded that. And it's focusing on materials and drugs discovery, and doing that on an automated basis that actually hugely advances the pace at which research can be done, and feeds into initiatives like the modernization of our industrial corridor in and around the EV segment and the supply chain that's critical to enable that.
And then in CPG, any kind of interesting use cases Director Institute is working on?
And you're talking about CPG as in retail and
Shampoo, soap,
yeah,
all these
yeah.
wonderful things.
So it is scary the degree to which organizations can now really truly understand their customer, and on the positive side, not the scary side, be so much more effective in serving you and delivering the sort of experience that everybody aspires to get. As I was saying earlier, the tech companies have kind of aced it, and they've totally changed their business model to only engage with you on an exception basis in order to deliver world-class experience to you. And then what isn't discussed a lot is the power of AI in the supply chain. So getting the product to the point where you engage as a consumer with it. And that's been extraordinary. And actually, an area that is quite mature in terms of the adoption of AI, but because it's in the background, people don't, unless they're involved in the supply chain, are not necessarily aware.
Oh yeah. Well, Tony, we're almost at time. If you could maybe in a minute or so, kind of give advice to boards, right? So if I sit on a board of directors after listening to your sage advice, what are the 2 or 3 things I should immediately do to get my organization, really moving on this important topic?
Yeah, I'd say one, baseline the use of AI within the company right away. Secondly, increase awareness within the board to the degree that I mentioned earlier. And you're talking about looking outside. Look in your organization first. You would be very surprised at the AI expertise you might already have, and they're going to be the best industry expert because they work in your company to come and talk to the board. And then really encourage that culture of experimentation and doing that in a safe way. And in parallel with all of that, updating your risk register to take your risk oversight to the level it needs to be in the board, around the CEO table, and into the organization. And as I said, we're working in finance and health to generate the reference frameworks for boards, and our intention is to make that available across other industries as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Quinn, do you want to take us away? Thank you so much, Tony. That was really fantastic.
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Quinn Lawson. Tony, thanks a lot on behalf of everybody. Where and how can people engage with you and the Vector Institute?
Just come to our Vector website.
Excellent. So the AI Tsunami, this annual webinar series, was created between David and Nicholas as a partnership, as an almost moral imperative for people to rally and act on this massive technological opportunity. What's coming up for the AI Tsunami? We've invited Evan Epstein, a longtime corporate governance practitioner and colleague of David's. He's based in Silicon Valley. He was the founder of the Business Law Institute at UCLA and is based in San Francisco. He also has the #1 ranked corporate governance podcast. He'll be telling us about what he's seeing in Silicon Valley, both with boards and also with regulations and institutions. As you know, David and Nicholas have been doing many custom board briefings. Nicholas said earlier that he's done 39 so far this year. Please reach out if you'd like to discuss those opportunities. And I'd also like to carve out 2 special announcements. Nicholas has an AI for Marketing online course. You know that as the former chief evangelist at Google for search, it should behoove anyone in marketing to get ahead of these trends with some leadership and education from Nicholas. We'll be following up with the link to that. The classes are twice a week for 2 or 3 hours, I believe, starting on July 9th. Anything else you'd like to add related to that, Nicholas? No? And then as a final announcement, 2 Fridays ago, we celebrated David's retirement from the David Johnston Center for Corporate Governance. Only a retirement at that institution, not a retirement elsewhere, however. So it was pretty remarkable for someone who is learning a lot about this space. There were commendations from Tiff Macklem, the chair of the Bank of Canada, a former governor general, and a bunch of prominent board members. I will share a link in the follow-on recording. And there are videos for anyone who wants to learn about board governance excellence and with a focus on this digital tsunami. One more thing, as we will be sending out the follow-on survey about how this event went. If you'd like to add something nice as a former student of David's related to ICD through Rotman, please do so. And thank you very much for participating. Invite interested parties and reach out.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Tony.
Okay, thank you. Our pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.